Hello YouTube viewers, welcome to my channel Science to Technology. In today's show, Camera Tuesday, we're gonna talk about Red Komodo-X. So let's dive deep into it. Now what is this Komodo-X? Well, it's a more powerful but more expensive Komodo itself. And it has same sensor as in same size. Super 35mm global shutter, that's a very important thing. CMOS sensor. All CCD are global shutter by design. CMOS you have to choose whether you want global or you want local. In this case rolling. So the size is more closer to APS-C, not to full frame 35mm. So be mindful. If you know how a depth of field looks in APS-C, that's what more or less what you're gonna get with Super 35 if the lens is same. Now body alone is $10,000. To give you a contrast of that number, the last variant is 6,000, meaning from Komodo to Komodo X jump is $4,000. And be mindful, Red is very clear about this, is that these two cameras are two independent cameras, as in X is not replacement for the previous one. Previous one still would be sold, everything would be maintained, updates and all that jazz. And X is if you want more oomph out of it. And the core focus sensor have been updated. New sensor from day one has to be built, that they did. The other more important part is the CPU is far more powerful now. So it can go up to 120 fps 4K and 80 fps at 6K, which is a significant jump from the basically last variant. That's the core fact. The chassis is just 1 inch longer. Other than other dimensions are more or less the same. So this is Komodo X. So what were the tech specs? Well, tech specs, they have learned from the feedback. So feedback was RF mount, awesome, but here's the deal. That shall not have non-locking mounts in cinema body. Cinema cameras are going jolted around a lot, so you need a proper robust locking mechanism. So RF locking mount this time. So, and it also has electronic communication, which mind you, not all cinema camera pays attention to it. Electronic communication means because modern lenses are what we call drive-by-wire, you need a lot of back and forth in terms of electronically. So figure out what it is, to figure out what focus it is, figure out what aperture it is, all that data. So that requires electrical communication. And be mindful, in cinema industry, all shot take care of like a very serious amount of data goes with metadata layer. Exactly, all that data matters. So having that is not a joke. For cinema industry, that's like, no, we really need to know. Now media, this is the biggest WISE update. They upgraded from CFast to CFast Express Type B. Basically this card is exactly the same card that is used in basically Sony cinema cameras, Canon cameras, Nikon cameras, Panasonic cameras and Fujifilm cameras. So price to terabyte is exponentially cheaper compared to all other models, and CFast 2.0 already phased out, so it's no longer being made as a new system. It's like if companies have stock of it, they are running removing it, but CFast 2.0 did not catch on. CFast Express Type B did catch on, so they're switching to a more powerful system. And be mindful, this media is NVMe, fundamentally more powerful. So this was an odd choice even in Komodo original one, but I think they have listened to the public, where it's like, dude, give a card format that's actually here and here to stay. Don't give a card format that's like about to be retired. So this was a good choice. And this has 2x the FPS. So if you go through all the resolution in 6K and X6K, in X6K you will find all the resolution have been bumped, meaning especially for music videos, they are like shut up, take money. So you go from 40 FPS to 80 FPS, 50 FPS to 100 FPS, 48 FPS to 96 FPS, 60 FPS to 120 FPS, and 120 to 240. Now you may be like, okay, if you do not have context of cinema cameras, the whole reason Red is so popular is they give you cinema camera at high speeds. Are there cameras that give higher than this? Yeah, even in consumer end you can get more FPS than that, but problem is generally there, even though they will say it's 4K or full HD, the quality is hyper garbage. Here quality is raw, meaning that's why they had to crop the sensor, because like the sensor is working the same. It's just that you cannot crunch the data, you cannot package the data and dump the data into the card fast enough so you can actually truly do high resolution high speed photography. That's the reason why Phantoms literally have their own magazine format. That's the reason inside Phantoms is just RAM modules, boatload of RAM. That's what has to absorb the data. So this 240 may look unimpressive for like basically full HD, but fundamentally it's high quality 240 FPS. So you can, let's say for cinema, you can literally have action scene 240 FPS and stretch it to 4K, it will still look good. So the only problem would be the cropping will change your field of view. So field of view you have to fix yourself, as in change the lens. If you're going from telephoto, you have to go to ultra wider to compensate for it, but it can be done. So they also support ProRes 444 XQ. Now ProRes is a format where companies like Red actually got in bed with Apple and they made a baby. So the baby is ProRes. Now ProRes is a designed container that's supposed to contain raw file. Not as raw as camera raw, because again, be mindful, every electronic sensor is different. So camera raws are true raw. This is as close as you can get to it, because be mindful, if you look into a camera sensor, as in like electronic sensor, electronically there is only two variable, the gain and shutter of course you change, but gain is kind of fixed. So to compensate for that, generally cameras will have two electronic circuit where you will have two analog to digital converter. You must have a dual base ISO. That's what it means. So whenever you are changing ISO, you're not actually doing anything. You just have one circuit and you're just boosting the gain in post. That post is happening in the camera itself, real time. But if you get the raw file, you do not have the Bayer filter algorithm, you do not have the gain applied to it, meaning ISO can be edited in post. So as long as you can get your millimeters right, as long as you can get your basically aperture and shutter time right, everything else can be tampered. White balance to shutter speed, all of that, shutter speed I'm saying, ISO can be changed in post, but you need a container that can handle all that. ProRes is an Apple-based container. Now, the reason why ProRes is so successful is because Apple integrated it very well with other softwares also, be it Adobe, be it DaVinci, all that jazz, and they also work with camera companies to get this almost an industry standard. So that's why it's a very desirable thing. And having ProRes Quad 4 XQ format, which is the highest capacity Apple can give you, gives simply means if you record the footage into this, you pull the card, you give it to editor just works. There is no transcoding or editing like that. So that's a very quick speed boost, and it is more than competent enough where it's like you're not going to be crying too much about it. It's like, oh, I wanted a red raw. So that's a good add-on. Another is pre-record has been boosted. Now many times you may be recording things that will happen and you have to press trigger when it happens. So the other is two way of dealing with it. Either you have good pre-record or you just start record and hope it happens. Now start record, hope when it happens, wastes a lot of space, card space. So having pre-record, that buffer is bigger because the CPU, I am pretty sure they must have more RAM into it. So it can go up to 10 seconds, meaning if you are waiting for something that happens periodically, let's say lightning, you can be just with the camera is pre-recording, consuming battery, it will consume battery, everything is fine, and lightning happens. Then you press the shutter, it captures 10 seconds behind, basically 10 seconds before you press the button. So pre-record, be mindful, previous one also had pre-record, but it was only 2 seconds. So the lag between you observing it, you going to the button, you pressing the button, that 2 seconds was not too comfortable, so to say. This is 10 seconds. So that is more comfortable. And be mindful, at lower resolution, it can be stretched to 10, basically 15 seconds, 20 seconds. That's like comfortable margin. It has gen lock, which is a fixed thing at this level of cost, meaning you can have 2 or 4 or hundreds of them synced, and they are syncing on frame by frame level. Time code is a metadata. It's just you are adding a metadata layer into the video stream. Gen lock is like actually triggering control, meaning if you have 2 of this and you want to do what we call VR rig, where you have 2 of them and capturing all of them, you need gen lock. Gen lock is a very complex function. Like it allows outside clocks to run the clock inside, meaning if you have an audio device that has better clock, basically what we call oscillators, that oscillator signal will fed inside and you can feed the same signal to hundreds of camera and all the camera would be synced, and it would be synced forever basically because all of them are working on same clock. So gen lock is a very good function. It has now, instead of 720p of the last variant, has full HD live streaming. Now like, wait a minute, would somebody live stream with this? Market Browning might try to do that, but that's not the reason. It can do that. If you have to do it, it can be done. But the primary reason is that when you are shooting, you have that screen for all the technical specs and all that. But that's tiny screen, and that's not even close to, let's say, iPhone screen or Android screen. So for that reason, having full HD feed directly going to your mobile phone allows you to compose much better, control much better. So having that fatter pipe instead of 720p to full HD, that's much more boost in terms of usability. So what about the performance? Performance is flat out. Komodo has already earned its name. It's already being used in multiple movies, especially with Michael Bay. With Hollywood is using it as a crash cam, not as a main camera, but as a crash cam. Now you have to understand the reason why all other manufacturers do not give you global shutter is that global shutter does compromise sensitivity a bit. How does it compromise it? Take the silicon, you slice it up, you make a pixel. Here's in global shutter, you have to slice it up a little bit. Basically, if a pixel is this big, you have to take a small corner of it, make a capacitor there so it can store the charge. Consequence, you fundamentally shrink the surface area of the pixel, each pixel, so it has much lower dynamic range. CCD has a different wiring structure, so it works, but in CMOS there is a penalty. Penalty is either you can choose same company, same, let's say Sony. If you go to Sony's Star Wars lineup, there is company that will give you, hey, do you want global shutter or do you want rolling shutter? Rolling shutter will have 16 stops of dynamic range, global shutter will only have 12. Why? That's the whole reason, because each pixel has been compromised in global shutter. But given that compromise of the dynamic range, it still has one of the most amazing functions. There is no jello artifact, meaning if you are doing anything where your camera is going bonkers, or basically a shaky cam, or you want to do a lot of post editing to it where you want to mask things, especially for visual effects. Visual effects, again, rolling shutter changes it. Like you cannot mask anything in rolling shutter, because if you have a pole, you draw a surface of the pole and camera pans, the mask fundamentally has to change, because your pole, let's say in a global shutter, it will be like this. Okay, awesome. But in rolling shutter, it will like whee, this will happen. So now you have to do frame by frame. It can be done, and companies do work their ass off to make rolling shutter as fast as possible. So Sony A7 III, if I'm not mistaken, goes up to 9 millisecond. Some cinema grade like RE can force it to almost 5 millisecond. But global shutter is like, bro, one instance. Like there is no rolling shutter, it's absolute. So for many people, it's like that little bit of dynamic range limitation is more than good enough. And be mindful, the dynamic range that we are bitching today, people would have poofed other people for that sort of dynamic range back in the day. And back in the day, not in like, 50 years ago. Back in the day is like 5 to 10 years ago. So flat out. That's why they are doing it. And Red has a mature pipeline. Be mindful, I have talked about dynamic range, but another aspect is colors. Colors matter more than dynamic range, more than noise performance. Colors are the key. Color science is the magic part. Red, because of the history, the legacy, they really have a good color grasp to it. Basically, Red has a color signature and people like it. And Red has built a pipeline from all other vendors, all other things that you need to sort out. Red has sorted that part. So Red has that color which you people like, and it has a red raw. So pipeline is sorted. Autofocus has been improved. Now it does have phase detect autofocus. What's the primary reason for that? Is it like Sony or Canon? Hell no. What it is that if you are doing a run and gun scenario, you can keep tapping once in a while to keep things in focus very quickly. And you can use basically photography lens which have much shorter throw but does snap quicker. You can utilize those also. Be mindful, in cinema, nobody expects to use autofocus. So if you look from that vantage point, this is like shut up, take money, because no other camera can give you the same raw oomph. And be mindful, the reason Red can give you and no other company can give you is because Red have a patent lock on it somehow. Somehow they patented the fact that you can capture a raw that is compressed in the body. That cannot be done by other one. And Nikon did it, Sony also did it, and Sony lost the battle. But again, Red wanted them to destroy all the Venice cinema lineup, but that did not happen. Even Judge was like, yeah, that's a bit much. But they did have to remove that function. You can give you ProRes. ProRes is through Apple, so ProRes can be done, but you cannot just give you, I have a format that is raw, that is compressed in the body. That cannot be done. Nikon is doing it, and Nikon is saying that we are buying the software from someone else, algorithm. But let's see, that's happening in the court right now. So this is another reason. Red is not magical, it's just that they have a patent lock. And RE literally to solve this was just like, hey, every frame is a raw file. Every frame just stores frame by frame. So that's how they bypass it. So Red does have that bad side, but they did use it. They did improve it. So it's really useful. Autofocus is comparatively far more result. So if you are doing a quick run and gun, this will give you a much better yield. And colors are great. Dynamic ranges are good, not bad. Let that be very clear. I'm saying dynamic range is bad, but it's a cinema camera, designed like a cinema camera, color pipeline fine-tuned like a cinema camera. So most people won't even know that it has lower dynamic range, because you have to have something equivalent to this, which has basically rolling shutter. Only then you're like, this is what little bit more dynamic range looks like. And be mindful, if your cinematographer is competent, they will clamp it to the footage. And that's how we used to do film photography. Film only has 8 to 10 stops of dynamic range, not 12, 15. So dynamic range of this is good. And be mindful, they have learned from the previous one that low noise had too much noise. So they have fine-tuned the dynamic range on the lower end. Rather than going bright, they're like, let's take care of the darkness. So performance is actually good. So what about competition? Now this is where I have to say Red remove the evil part of like patent locking something weird. They did figure out there is a gap in the market, and the gap is that global shutter is a desirable function. It's a like flat out shut up, take money for many process. We just don't have that choice. We just don't have choice. Like it was like companies are like, we're gonna give you dynamic range. It's like, dude, I don't need dynamic range. I don't want jello in my footage, especially if you want to do compositing. And if you have multiple cameras and all that, it's like, dude, it's a hassle. If you have to do VR, if you have to do 3D, it's a hassle. Can it be done? Yes, it can be done. It's just that global shutter would be much better. So they realize like there is a need for global shutter. So they're like, let's give it. And the dynamic range that compromise, they have improved. This is Mark II variant. So they have improved a lot. So there is a niche spot where this is not as expensive as RE's cameras, but has some unique selling point, and the dynamic range compromise has been improved a lot. And be mindful, you're supposed to clamp the dynamic range of the scene before you shoot. That's why you have lighting, ND filters and all that jazz. So overall, from a usability point of view, and if you have good color, it's like shut up, take money. So Red literally fine-tuned and focused on that. Is there any other company that does this? Yes, Zcam E2S6G. Now there is E2S6, which is a rolling shutter. S6G, G is for global shutter. That gives you literally, it's like a Red Komodo if it was made by some other brand. However, it does have lower FPS. I'm pretty sure basically the CPU of this puppy is weaker, so it cannot give you higher FPS. Back in the day of Komodo original, it was competent, but in case of Komodo-X, it does not hold a candle. I'm expecting them to release a second variant, but it does not have the ecosystem. So ecosystem means whatever the pipeline, video footage, everything. That ecosystem is not present here. So that's a very big weakness. Whenever you are going into a cinema, you have to understand the most expensive camera that people orgasm over, it's IMAX film camera. That is 70mm 15 perforation. That's cheap. If you're talking about any Hollywood movie, that's cheap. How do I know that's cheap? Yeah, here's the deal. The movie that used all things in IMAX, Oppenheimer, yeah, that's a 100 million movie. Barbie is more expensive than that. So why the heck? Cameras are not expensive. When you are talking about millions of dollars that you have to give to the just cast and crew, that amount of money that goes into camera becomes chump change. If you go to them and you're gonna say, this Red camera is so expensive, they're like, bro, do you know the price of RE cameras? They make this look like chump change. Where it's like, RE, ooh, the handle, billions of dollars. I mean, it's not billions of dollars, but you get the point. It's fundamentally on a different ballgame. And that's why the companies charge it like that. Whereas like, if you are asking the price, it's not for you. It's like if you are dealing with a cast and crew where you actually are willing to pay for the highest grade quality, they're doing it. So I would really love that is Zcam upgrade this one. And of course, they will still need years before they can build up the ecosystem. Where right now they have their own custom RAW format, and that RAW format, of course, not as good as Red, simply because it's not as well engaged as Red. So not a bad camera, but you see that's why I have to say Red like literally looked into the market and it's like, hey, everybody is just going after dynamic range. It's like, dude, we have more than enough dynamic range. How about we solve a problem that nobody else is solving? Because this camera, if you have a rolling shutter camera, making a VR rig, it's very difficult. Making a 360 rig with multiple camera for cinema level work, very difficult. If you do that with global shutter, shut up, take money is child's play. So Red just realized there was a gap in the market and they just took it. Blackmagic did announce it, they never delivered it. And for example, Zcam, they're using sensor from Sony. So Sony knows how to make it. They have just not made any body to go with it. It's like they should make one at least, where just try it. Like, is global shutter good enough? Of course, please make sure they give gen lock with it, so you can truly expand its capability. But so there is no competition. One of this is like not bad, but like not great. So they have found a very niche and they are milking it. So this was my presentation on Red Komodo-X. Hopefully you have liked it, learned from it. In that case, please give the like button, share it amongst your friends. That will help me a lot. If you didn't like it, didn't enjoy it, I urge you to press dislike, press it twice to show me extra disappointment. Please leave a comment because I do try to reply to all of them. Subscribe, press the bell icon if you're free. And as always, thanks for watching.